Welcome to Read Local NH, a unique podcast that celebrates New Hampshire authors. I'm your host, Laura Canoy. Today, our guest is Ty Gagne, whose books have profoundly touched readers both here in the Granite State and far beyond. Ty is the author of 3 works of nonfiction focused on dramatic winter rescues in the White Mountains. Now, every year, all 3 of these books make the bestseller lists at New Hampshire independent bookstores. In fact, one Granite State bookseller told me a few years back that all he wanted for Christmas was another Ty Gagne book. So Ty, welcome back to Read Local NH. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Laura. It's great to be here, and congratulations on Shopkeeper.
Thank you very much.
It's been great to watch.
Thank you. So how did you get started, Ty, writing these winter mountain rescue books? Your first came out, I think, in around 2015?
Right around 2017,
okay.
And it originated as a presentation that I'd put together for work, taking mountaineering accidents that had taken place over time, kind of approaching them like a case study. And I had planned to present this at my organization's annual risk management conference, never intending to write a book about Kate Matrosovan tragedy, but had actually put that case into the presentation almost at the last minute because it was in such close proximity to the date of the conference. And then it just took on a life of its own.
So remind viewers and listeners what you do for your day job, and how that fits into why you use this particular mountain tragedy for a presentation at work.
Sure. I work for a public entity risk pool, Primex, which is based out of New Hampshire, and we provide risk management services and insurance-like coverages to school, municipal, and county government throughout New Hampshire. Every year we have an annual training conference. And that particular year, May of 2015, I was presenting that year, and I was, again, I called it Trouble in the Presidentials, what a mountaineering accident can teach us about leadership and decision-making. I had 2 case studies, and then Kate tragically lost her life in February of that year, and there was so much talk about it, and it was such a compelling story that I added that. And over the course of a year and a half or so, I was kind of led to a book that I didn't know I was writing.
And a whole side career was born, Ty. I mean, it's really, it's pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I've had a lot of time to reflect over the past decade about this, and I think one of the most meaningful parts about this is how my work and my writing have crossed over. Because I'm writing about risk management, teamwork, leadership, decision-making. And so my work informs my writing informs my work. I'm talking to subject matter experts all the time, whether it's aviation, mountain rescue, or healthcare. And it's just been such a nice melding of the two.
Well, I think that's what makes these books so compelling is you don't just say, this happened, this happened, this happened. You say, here's the decision-making process, and we're all reading it, and we're like, oh, that's where it fell apart. Or we're watching them make these terrible decisions, and we're saying, don't do it. So I think that's what makes these books so powerful. I mean, they have been hugely popular in New Hampshire. I was looking at the 2025 bestsellers at New Hampshire independent bookstores at the end of the year, and there it is, no matter which bookstore, Ty Gagne, Ty Gagne, Ty Gagne. I think Matt actually has a picture of your B&H stage event where you talked about your latest book, The Lions of Winter. I mean, look at the lines. I mean, it's just, it was unbelievable.
I'm so grateful for the response to the books, and the writer, as you know, the writer does the work, and with the help of a publisher and your editor, you get it onto the bookshelf. But it's really the reader that decides the book's fate, and I am so thankful for the readers. They have. I think they've made them what they are. Just word of mouth, passing books along. Parents giving books to their teenagers who are in driver's ed, who might not even hike. There's just been a lot.
So the teenager hopefully will untangle some of that decision-making that we see. Why do you think these have touched such a chord, though, Ty? I mean, we talked a little bit about, it's fascinating to read about the decision-making, but why else do you think these books have just really touched people here in New Hampshire?
I think the love of the White Mountains absolutely resonates with people from New Hampshire, but it goes far beyond that. I mean, I've met people from all over the world that come to the White Mountains to climb, hike, recreate, and it's just a really special place for so many people. And I think that's one of the big reasons. The other reason I think is obviously I have a big hiking and climbing readership, but I think also if you're not a hiker, you know, you drive through Franconia Notch or Pinkham or Crawford and you look up and you see these beautiful peaks and they're mysterious for you. And you know, what goes on up there? And they're absolutely beautiful and breathtaking, and they can be incredibly dangerous. They can be both things at the same time.
So for audience members who aren't completely familiar with your work, let's talk a little bit about each book, Ty, and working backwards with the latest one, The Lions of Winter, that was released, I think, in December of 2024. That's where that picture came earlier from, where the lines were down the street at the B&H stage. What's the basic storyline there? That
is a story that, an event that took place in January 1982. In fact, the 34-year anniversary was just last week. Where two young ice climbers from Pennsylvania went missing on Mount Washington, ended up in a place, Great Gulf Wilderness, a place where climbers in Huntington Ravine, where they started, had never ended up before. And it hasn't happened since. And over the course of this multi-day search, two members of a volunteer search and rescue team, Albert Dow and Michael Hartrick, were descending Lionhead on Mount Washington. In terrible conditions, they were overtaken by an avalanche. Michael was injured, and Albert tragically lost his life. He was the first member of a backcountry organized search and rescue team in New Hampshire to lose his life in the line of duty. Thankfully, it hasn't happened since. And so I tell the story, but I also talk about what has changed within the search and rescue community since that time.
Yeah, you put a lot in there. It's about Albert, it's about his family, it's about his friends, it's about the climbers who make these mistakes, but it's also about how search and rescue changes after this horrible tragedy. How did it change afterwards? What were some of the key components of change that you saw after that?
Yeah, and the change wasn't immediate. It occurred over time, but some of the things that happened, I think most quickly, is that members of the search and rescue teams got more formal wilderness medical training. SOLO, which is based out of North Conway, has played a very important part of providing wilderness medical training and certifications. They started to participate in avalanche training, purchased avalanche technology, learned how to use that technology, and then really, particularly with Mountain Rescue Service, which was the team that existed at the time, really started to put even more emphasis on technical rescue. They are the technical rescue team. So if you think of, there's a climber on a cliff in Cannon, or again in Huntington Ravine, or Cathedral Ledge, that's the team that gets called to handle that technical component.
Well, there's a lot in there, and I highly recommend the book. But let's talk about the other two.
Sure.
Where You'll Find Me, released, as you just said, in 2017. You mentioned Kate Matrasova. Just give us a quick sketch of that book as well.
Sure. Kate Matrasova, she was 32 years old. She had emigrated to the United States from Omsk, Siberia, and over the course of 10 years, just had incredible successes academically, professionally, did a lot of significant mountain peaks throughout the world, had been guided in those endeavors, came to the Northern Presidentials in winter of 2015, and attempted to do a Northern Presidential Traverse alone in what we call a light and fast manner, so not a lot of gear so that she could move quickly. The weather was forecasted to be really, really bad. She underestimated how quickly it would arrive, and it arrived earlier than she had expected it to, and she was overtaken by just brutal weather conditions and sadly lost her life.
And I remember, because I was still at New Hampshire Public Radio when this happened, and there was a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking about, why she did this and who was this person. But when I read your book, I thought, okay, she knew I mean, she made some poor decisions, but she knew what she was doing. She had done really tough mountains. She was super fit. So she wasn't just some, weekend warrior going out there.
Right, and she was attempting to do the 7 Summit Challenge, the highest summit on each of the 7 continents. She had done 3. She had Everest in her sights as the next mountain. And I think what I tried to talk about with this particular book and really getting into the decision-making science is that on those expeditions she had been guided along with the other members of the expedition, where essentially all decision-making and the management of risk is taken on by the guides. And the contrast here is, Kate arrived in February 2015 alone, and had to rely on herself for decision making.
I see.
And I think it just underestimated the weather and how powerful that can be with the terrain.
People underestimate the whites, I think, because the Rocky Mountains, they're so big, they're so, craggy and so forth, and same thing for the Alps. But don't underestimate our little old mountains, because
right, and I think accessibility makes it even more challenging because it's right, there's major trailheads right off of 93, 302, Route 2, and it's easy to get to, but once you get up there, it's a whole different story.
So the last one, and one that I guess I especially attach to because I've taken the Concord Trailways a bunch of times, and those bus drivers are always so kind and so sweet. This was the last traverse. It's about 2 Concord Trailways bus drivers. Again, there's a winter White Mountains tragedy. Just give us a quick sketch of that too, please, Ty.
Sure. Another February outing. It was 2008, and Fred Fredrickson and James Osborne, who, as you said, worked for Concord Coach at the time, they attempted to do a traverse of the Franconia Ridge in a single day, which is done on a regular basis. And again, felt that the bad weather that was forecasted was going to be arriving later in the day when they had planned to be below tree line, as Kate did 7 years later on a different peak. But they were overtaken by a really powerful squall that hit a front that had stalled out essentially over the White Mountains, and they were benighted on the ridge line. They had not planned to be overnight. They were not packed or prepared to be overnight. And the next morning they got up and attempted to self-rescue and just ran into absolutely brutal conditions on the ridge. Winds 70, 80 miles an hour, 60 below zero with the wind chill. And Fred succumbed to hypothermia and lost his life just about 150 feet from tree line. James continued on a short distance before he fell unconscious, and James was rescued by members of the New Hampshire Army National Guard, New Hampshire Fish and Game, and Mountain Rescue Service on Little Haystack Mountain.
And I won't give it away, but that is an amazing scene. So a lot of the book is, again, their hike, their plans, and so forth, but then a lot of it is about the rescue, which is just, there's a movie there.
Yeah, and the rescue was historic. It was historic for a couple of reasons, which you'll find in the book.
We won't give it away for now.
Right.
These are, Ty, emotionally dramatic books. And these are real people we're learning about. I mean, this isn't just some, made-up fictional character. Does that take a toll on you as you write?
I appreciate the question. I get that every once in a while. I think for the first 2 books, I was able to not emotionally detach, but really make sure that I wasn't making it about me. Like, this is their story. These were their experiences. I'm not going to walk around saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe, I sat through that conversation. It was so difficult. But with Lions, it did take a toll on me. I had developed relationships with members of the rescue team that were part of the 1982 search and the loss of their teammate. And some of them have been in all 3 books. So that tells you just the longevity and the level of commitment these volunteers have. They've been doing it for many of them for 40 plus years. So I was sitting with them recounting one of the worst days of their lives. I was revisiting some of my own traumatic experiences as a first responder in a small town when I was right around their age when they were going through this. And my father was ill and in declining health, and so there was just a lot going on, and it was really hard to compartmentalize it. And when I got to writing about the day that Albert was lost, my father had passed away, and I had to work really hard not to make my grief the rescuer's grief. So it was a lot.
I also wonder if, having written these other two books, I wonder if some of that was bubbling up there as well, that it just all sort of came to the surface at once.
Yeah, and because I still keep in touch with, I talk with James regularly.
Right,
He's out on the West Coast now, and I'm keeping in touch with people that are part of these stories. And I think, like you said, it was almost like this perfect storm as I was writing about storms, both real and personal. So yeah.
I mentioned this a minute ago, but I want to talk to you a little bit more about it. One of the things that I think really has drawn people to these books, Ty, is the way that you walk us through that decision-making process. And we as the readers are going, no, 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 like a horror movie, don't open the door.
Yeah.
What's the mindset that you have seen, researching and writing these books, among people who make these mistakes time and time and time again? And this is where your background in risk assessment and decision making, comes into play so perfectly.
Yeah, I think there are so many different things at play, but what I think one of it comes down to emotions, right? If we want something or we don't want something, I want to reach this summit, I want to do this traverse, or I don't want to turn around, we will only pay attention to information that supports what we want or what we don't want. And so we're not, there's all of this information that's available to us when we're driving our car, when we're out hiking, or whatever it is we're doing. And sometimes we will just dismiss or ignore red flags or information that would be really helpful to us in making decisions. And I also think, again, it's the White Mountains in particular, they're so unpredictable. And when things go wrong, it's an unforgiving environment. And what you see, I think, in these stories is there are a series of decisions that are made over the course of a day, over the course of a hike, that once something goes wrong, it's almost this cascade of all of these red flags that have built up over the course of the day. You're not now managing one thing, you're managing a lot of things at once.
It's so interesting what you said. So we know what we want, and then we just ignore information that might get in the way of what we want.
Yeah, yeah.
And that combined with the unforgiving environment of the White Mountains, weather changes on a dime in the Whites. So
Right.
That's some of the patterns that you've seen again and again.
Yeah, you have human factors, our own stuff, the stuff that if we're out there together, it's interpersonal dynamics, it's levels, it's trust, and then you overlay that with an environment that can change in an instant. It just adds, it amplifies the whole situation.
Well, that's another set of decision making that I want to ask you about, because with the first book, Kate Matrasova, she went off by herself, but in the other two books, it's buddies, going up, doing these winter traverses. What are these sort of interpersonal dynamics that can lead to poor decision making?
Friendship. So it's emotion, right? It's the friendship, it's the relationship that we have with one another. I don't want to disappoint you, therefore
let him down.
I don't want to let him down, or I don't want to disappoint you, therefore I'm just not going to share my concerns or what I'm seeing. Or maybe there's a competitive nature to our relationship, and I can't project weakness or show that I'm slowing down, so I push myself. And I've been in that situation. I've written about that situation. It's the prologue of Where You'll Find Me. So the things that inter-office dynamic, in office dynamics or sitting around the dinner table as a family, it's all this kind of the same stuff.
And you think it's a bad idea,
Yeah.
but you're excited that your teenager is taking the initiative, so maybe you don't say anything, but
Right.
maybe it's not such a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you definitely see those dynamics at play in the later two books. How do you remain, Ty, unjudgmental about these hike's gone awry. Because that's another beauty, I think, of these books, is that you're not, like most of us, folding your arms and saying, well, if he had only blah, blah, blah. So.
Yeah, I've made those mistakes. I've made those mistakes at 5,000 feet. I've made those mistakes at work. I've made them driving, or something I said that I maybe wish I could have taken back. So we're all human. We're all susceptible to these things. And again, I think in the mountains, it's just amplified because of the nature of that environment. But we've all had those things in our lives that have gotten away from us. And that's how I approach this. These are human stories. These are people who are sitting with me and being vulnerable because they want to help other people.
Right, they're sharing their stories so that you can warn the rest of us, slow down, think about it.
Yeah, and I think the fascinating part of this, and just getting out and talking with a lot of people, which you're doing right now, which is one of the best parts of all of this, is and you mentioned this earlier, you can see where that was a bad decision. Well, that might have been your moment where you thought it turned, but someone sitting 3 rows back doesn't see the problem yet. And so that, I think what that goes to is just, we all perceive risk differently.
Right.
And one of the things that I really like to hear from readers is that, Ty, I was so upset with this person or these two at the beginning, and by the end I was crying for them. I wanted them to be okay. I wanted them to survive. And I think that's just part of the human condition, right? Just the empathy that comes through people who read them.
I've had that same reaction. At the beginning, I'm thinking, oh, come on. But by the end of the book, I'm rooting for the person.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that they make it. You've done a lot of speaking engagements around the state. You clearly love connecting with readers. What are some of the just most interesting questions that you get from audiences? Or themes that come up again and again? Yeah,
I think, hey, you've changed the way that I pack when I hike now. And I'm like, thank you, but you read the book, you did the work, you reflected on your own, how you prepare, and you made the intentional decision to change. So give yourself credit. People want to know how are some of these folks how are they doing today? What are they up to today? I get, what are you writing now? It's,
no, I'm going to ask you that question.
Yeah, okay.
Don't worry.
Yeah, but the questions, as you and I were talking about before the show, each group you go into, there's a question you've never gotten before, right. Or it's asked a different way, and that's the part I just love, being out there talking to them.
I know,
yeah.
I know. When I was on the radio, I used to say I love meeting seeing the faces behind the ears, and now I say I love meeting the faces behind the eyes.
Yeah.
It's really fun. And I've told you before, Ty, you've changed the way that I pack for a hike. If I'm doing a little 3-mile easy loop on a beautiful summer day, and I see people going by me with packs that are this big, and they'll be fine, but darn it, I've got I've got enough for an overnight in there, And so many people say, yeah, I don't want to be the subject of another Ty Gagne book. So what does that feel like to have had such an impact?
I remember, we'll get to this a little bit later, but I can remember the moment I wanted to write a book. And there was a particular book that was really influential for me, and I never could have imagined I'd be sitting here or out and about talking with groups, and just the response. I'm very, very humbled by it. I don't think I have a really good handle on it. But yeah,
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Perfect segue. At the end of every Read Local NH interview, I always ask my guests what New Hampshire authors have been influential to them. And for you, Tyler, I'd like to frame it a little bit differently. What outdoors books or hiking books have especially inspired you? And you brought some of them.
Sure.
So we'll hold them up.
Yeah, so Not Without Peril by Nicholas Howe.
I interviewed Nicholas Howe a million years ago. Yes.
Yeah, so this is the book that inspired me to this. When I read this book, and it started with, he had written a piece for Yankee magazine, and then about a month later the book came out, and I held the book, I read it, I'm like, I want to do this. I want to do this. Because I'd wanted to write a book in my late teens, early 20s, but I had nothing. But it took 20 years, but this was an inspiration. Nick, I think we have different outlooks on accidents, and I think we have a different tone in how we write about them. But this really, for me, was the standard and the true source of inspiration to write about accidents in the White Mountains.
Yeah, that's a sort of iconic book about New Hampshire outdoors. What else do you have there, Ty?
This is Losing the Garden by Laura Waterman. Laura and her late husband, Guy Waterman, they're stewards of the White Mountains. They've written extensively multiple books about the White Mountains.
I know those names.
Yeah, and she doesn't live in New Hampshire. She lives just over the New Hampshire border in Vermont. But Laura has been so helpful to me. And this book, Laura's husband took his own life on Mount Lafayette in 2000.
Yes, that's why the name is familiar.
Yeah, and this is she wrote this afterward, and it's a story of love, loss, grief, and renewal.
Wow, powerful.
It's very, very powerful, and she's a beautiful writer, and she's a wonderful person. And so I just want to encourage people to consider reading Laura's work.
And the next one is one of my favorites by one of my favorite hiking authors.
Yeah.
The venerable, iconic Mike Dickerman.
Yes, 4,000 Footers of the White Mountains. Mike Dickerman, Steve Smith. Steve was the owner of Mountain Wanderer in Lincoln. He recently sold it. Mike owns Bond Cliff Books, both of whom have been incredibly helpful to me with research. And this book is just so good. It's trail information, it's history, it's geology, it's all of it. And I'm really leaning heavily on this right now. But it's a fantastic book.
I can see the Post-it notes.
Yep.
My research books for my own novel are littered with Post-it notes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ty, what else do you have?
The Worst Weather on Earth by William Lowell Putnam.
Okay, that's useful.
Yeah, William was he was the president of the American Alpine Club. He was on the board of trustees of the Mount Washington Observatory. He served in World War II in the 10th Mountain Division, did a ton of trail work and stewardship in the presidential range, was the founder of the White Mountain Ski Club, and he wrote this book, and it's really the history of the Mount Washington Observatory. I referenced it quite a bit in Lines of Winter. I'm using it again, but it's a great read. Out of print, but if you can find it, it's worth it. And lastly, Peaks and Paths, A Century of the Randolph Mountain Club.
Oh, okay. A lot of people might not be familiar with the Randolph Mountain Club.
Yeah, the
okay.
Gray Knob Cabin, the Perch. I think everyone knows of the Appalachian Mountain Club, the Randolph Mountain Club, also a nonprofit. Tremendous stewards of the Northern Presidential Range, and my current project absolutely is tied to and focused on the Northern Presidentials, and members of the RMC have just been really helpful to me with research as well. So I wanted to plug this.
My hiking books, my outdoors books are not as rich, but 52 with a View.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love that?
Right.
Mike Lanza, he used to live in New Hampshire. His hiking book, AMC White Mountains, mine are not quite as deep. And this one, I really recommend it. It's short stories. It's by Bill Donahue, who used to write for Outside Magazine, Backpacker, Bicycling. He is a very good writer, and the stories in here are amazing, so I've been enjoying this. So we only have like a minute left.
Yeah.
What are you working on next? How much can you tell us about it?
Sure. So right now I'm working on, it is the accident in the White Mountains that fixed my gaze on accidents in the White Mountains. It's an older story. I was in my 20s. I have never let go of it. It was one of the 2 case studies that I had used in the presentation and then added the story of Cape Matrosova. I had intended for it to be my 3rd book, but Lines became the 3rd book, and this will be the 4th. So I'm working on it now. I'll be writing when time allows through the summer, and I hope it's out next year.
We can't wait. We'll have you back.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. This went so fast.
Thank you. You've always been so supportive of me going back to the exchange, and I'm so grateful to you and our friendship and all of the support that you give to New Hampshire authors. It's
important because there's some terrific New Hampshire authors, and they deserve to be celebrated.
As do you.
Thank you. So it's Ty Gagne, author of 3 popular books about winter rescues in the White Mountains that we talked about. And thanks as always to Concord TV for producing Read Local NH. You can check out Concord TV at yourconcordtv.org or their YouTube channel, Concord NH TV. Thanks everyone for listening to Read Local NH.